Welcome to Group 1 CIT 261 second meeting. This is September 30th. Today we're going to start off with a lesson with Ryan, and then we'll have a lesson by Edward.
All right. And you guys can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to be talking about manipulating. Oh, are you guys ready?
Yeah. I'm trying to switch over. Yep, that's you. Sorry about that. All right. Yeah, we're ready.
All right. There we go. Okay. So today I'm going to be talking about manipulating CSS class properties using JavaScript. This is one powerful tool that we can use to modify our CSS on the fly. So to start with, what we need to do is you have to understand that there's the DOM that controls the entire document. So what we're doing is we're actually searching through that document, which is the page, the structure of the page, to find specific elements or tags, and then modifying the CSS on the fly. So in this example here, what we're doing is we're actually searching for an ID. You can see that with a get element by ID. We're looking for the ID of P2, and then we're going to style that that CSS with a color of blue. So it goes through, and when it originally loads, it loads with the regular color, and then the script runs, and then it changes it to blue, and then it goes through the rest of the page. So that's kind of an old way of looking at selecting the IDs, and this is how I learned to find IDs and tags and classes with the get element by ID. But we'll actually look at a newer way to do that. So what we can also do is we can do this based off of a button click. Sorry, I just have an example here of what it would change to if you click the button on this example. So once again, it's looking for the ID. The ID is ID1, and then it's going to change the color of the CSS to red, and that's done on click. If you can see here the on click function, so it'll look for event listeners and modify the CSS based off of those. So this is the new kid on the block, the new way of actually going through and finding those selectors. It's query selector and query selector all. The thing that's powerful about this is you don't have to specify whether it's an ID or a class or whatever. It just searches through all of the elements and finds the one that you selected. So that's what a query selector does. It does one specific tag or element, and you can see here that that you just use query selector, and then you're calling for a tag or an ID here. But down in the next one, we're actually calling for a class. So you don't have to modify the get element ID or get element by ID or get element by class. You just use one syntax. The other option is to do a query selector all, and that's used for if you're doing a generic tag, like here I have images. That'll select all of the images within the document and modify the tag that way. And so there's actually two ways that you can style the CSS. You can go and style it directly, getting an element, adding a style, and then modifying that color or whatever you're trying to do. Or you can do the add and remove classes, and that's what we're looking at here. is just changing the entire class based off of the JavaScript. So in this example, it's we're looking at a drop-down menu. So there's 3 ways to do it. There's you can add the class list. So you take the drop-down .class list and do an add on it, and then a remove. The difficulty about that is you're looking at, you have to find the current state and then run through your CSS based out, or your JavaScript based off of that current state, or you can just use the toggle function, which will just flip flops them back and forth. So that's the main idea of what we were trying to do with the classes. So I do have an example here. This is a pop-out menu that I had, a sliding menu that I had created for one of my other classes that uses this functionality. So I just want to look at the HTML here. It's pretty simple. We just have a navigation, a couple layers to get the icon where we want, and then just some different links inside the menu. Now the CSS, right here, we're just creating the icon, but down here is where we actually create the menu. And what's interesting about this is we have it on this part right here where we actually hide the menu to the left, so it renders when the page renders, so you're not re-rendering after you add this class. And we set the opacity to 0, so it's completely hidden. But then down here is where we actually add this open class, which will open the menu, and that's done through transformation. Pulls the menu, unhides it, and then slides it over based off of that one class. And then this is where we actually change the location to 0 and change the opacity to 1. And that's all done with just this 3 lines of JavaScript right here. Now I have also the add and remove just listed here. But like I said before, you actually have to find the current state and then modify it based off of that. So the toggle is actually quite a bit more powerful and a lot easier to use. And so when you run it, that's all it does, is it runs and opens that menu and slides it out pretty easily. So that's the example I have. Just a couple notes I wanted to share off of that is that to show the power of the query selector. So right now I have, as you can see, I have the query selector looking for just the nav, which is the overall tag of nav that you can see up here. But I can simply add a hashtag, let that refresh, and you can see it works just the same. Or I can change it to the class, because all of this nav has a class of nav and an ID of nav, and all of those work exactly the same. So you don't have to modify your get element by ID at all. You just modify what you're looking for and it changes that. So yeah, that's what I had prepared for you guys. Any questions? All right.
No questions from me.
I mean, it's pretty straightforward, but it's a very powerful tool. So
how's this? Sorry, I had to find my unmute button. So how is this any different than the get element by ID?
What's that?
How is this any different than the get element by ID?
Well, like I said, the query selector, it's just you don't have to if we were to do that, you'd have to do this. So var update L equals document dot element by ID. So what you would have to do here is, right, you put in your ID. So I have to call specifically just the ID that's labeled on my nav, and that theoretically should work.
Can I interject something?
Yep.
So something I've learned is being able to get elements by the query selector is you can use any CSS selector, like you can do class and
Exactly.
ID combination,
Okay.
whereas the ID you're limited to that ID.
Exactly. So yeah, that's the idea. So here you can see, like, I changed it to get element by ID, and I have nav in there, and yeah, it works. But if I wanted to say, okay, well, I really want to do, you know, like an image class or something else where I have multiple elements or multiple you know, HTML elements that are labeled with that class. If I just change this to a class, now it doesn't work, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if I have the query selector, so right now I'm selecting the nav, the HTML tag nav, or I can select the ID by adding the pound sign, or I can select the class by adding the dot. So I just need to modify that one character to select to decide what I'm looking for.
Okay.
So that's the power of it. You don't have to change your JavaScript, you just change what you're looking for.
Oh, perfect.
So,
One thing I think is cool is you can combine, I think, two classes. Like say you have an element with 3 classes or an element with only 2. You can combine different classes together to get the specific element that you're trying to find.
exactly. Just like here I have dot open dot menu. You could add that into, you know, add that into there if you wanted to. So anyway, yeah. So that's what I have. Any other questions or comments?
I have one.
Yeah.
As far as using the query selectors, it's actually a pretty decent practice, especially if you plan on moving on to further frameworks of JavaScript. Like in particular, jQuery selects almost exclusively by CSS selector.
Right.
So
yeah.
That could happen to you if you want to go further with this.
Yeah, that is a good point. So yeah, that jQuery, yeah, it doesn't do the get element. It only does the query selector. So, all right, guys.
Cool. All right, thank you, Ryan. Let's see here. Now we have here. We're gonna have Edward up on up. You ready, Edward?
Yeah.
Let me see.
Do I have to show my screen, or is that doing already?
Yeah, share your screen.
Okay, question number 2. How do I do that?
Should be on the left-hand side, the little...
Well, I found the button. It's just not doing anything. Sorry about this. The internet's been slow, presumably because everyone's streaming conference. So,
Not a problem.
All right, it's not working for me. I'm gonna try and refresh the page and see if that helps. I don't think it's gonna work, guys.
All right. Well, maybe what you'll do is just create a video and then send us the link for it.
All right. Sorry about that.
Okay. Let's see. All right. So Edward, you'll just send us a video of yours, and we'll make sure we get the professor the link as well. Is we're gonna need before our meeting next week.
I don't believe so. Not that I can think of off the top of my head.
All right. Well, assuming nothing else pops up, we'll meet next Saturday at 10 a.m. our normal time.
All right.
Works for me.
I will see
sounds
you
good.
then.
All right, we'll talk to you later.
Enjoy
Bye.
conference.